Hey guys, tonight we're going to step inside a quiet temple on a stormy coast of Japan, a place where something small, something stitched, seems to breathe in the dark. You might not notice it at first. It's just a doll, after all. Hair a little too long, kimono a little too perfect. But tonight, you'll get to know her. And if her hair brushes your ankle while you sleep, well, don't worry. She does that sometimes. There's something oddly comforting about haunted objects, right? They don't move fast. They don't chase. They just wait. Patiently. Silently. For decades. You probably won't survive this if you're expecting jump scares or cheap thrills. No, this is slower. Stranger. Sleepier. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. She's small, barely the size of a child's torso. Her kimono is perfectly tied, the red and gold threads shimmering with rain. Her feet, if she has any, are tucked beneath her. You don't remember seeing anyone leave her. There's no note. No basket. Just her. The temple's sliding door creaks open behind you. A monk with eyebrows like caterpillars leans out. He sees the doll, frowns, and mutters something about unwanted gifts. You pick her up anyway. She's heavier than expected, solid, not hollow. And her hair, well, it doesn't feel like the usual horsehair or silk thread that it feels human. The monk shrugs, turns back inside, and you follow. This is Menenji Temple. It's seen better days. The tatami mats are frayed. One wall leans suspiciously westward. But it's warm inside, and someone pours you a tiny cup of tea that tastes like toast and moss. As you sip, you set the doll down beside you. She faces the room now. Her glassy eyes catch the candlelight and reflect it back with a little too much precision. You don't mean to stare, but something about the shape of her lips, they're parted just enough, like she's about to whisper. Someone brings in a rice ball. Someone else coughs. The storm outside begins to quiet, and a bell chimes the hour in a tired, almost apologetic tone. You try to ask about the doll, but the monks shrug. One of them says she wasn't here yesterday. Another insists she's been here since before the Russo-Japanese War. You get the feeling no one wants to touch her. Except you. Later, as you unroll your bedding, you place the doll at your feet. Just to keep her out of the way, you tell yourself. She sits quietly. Doesn't blink. Doesn't move, but her hair, you notice, now brushes the tatami mat. You're sure it didn't earlier. You fall asleep to the smell of incense and pickled vegetables. It's a shallow, fidgety kind of sleep, the kind you get when you nap on a friend's couch and don't know if their cat is planning to smother you. At some point in the night, you dream, faint images of a little girl giggling, running, hugging something tightly to her chest. When you wake up, the doll is still sitting upright. Her head is tilted now, just slightly. Looking toward the door. Waiting. In the morning, the monk with the eyebrows says her name is Okiku. No one remembers who named her that. She's just always been Okiku. Historians still argue whether she arrived in 1918 or 1916. Some say it was during the Spanish flu, when many families lost children and made unusual decisions about mourning. Others claim she was left by a traveling performer who vanished into a snowstorm the next week, but there's one thing they agree on: she doesn't like to be moved too far from the temple. One time, someone tried to send her to a museum in Tokyo. That train never arrived. Not the doll. Not the courier. Just the shipping crate, empty and slightly warm. Still, there are fringe accounts that say she was crafted in Sapporo by a dollmaker named Eijiro Suzuki, known for using real human hair from his clients' children. That wasn't unheard of back then. Some parents thought it brought good luck. Others thought it trapped the soul, just a little. And you? You've just begun your journey. Okiku stares up at you, still not blinking. You're holding Okiku now. Not because you want to, necessarily. But because one of the monks hands her to you with both palms flat, like he's offering you a freshly caught fish that might still be twitching. She's heavier than before. Or maybe your arms are just more aware. Her kimono is lined with pale peach silk, embroidered with chrysanthemums. A traditional motif. Flowers of grief, rebirth, and funerals. The stitching is meticulous, clearly custom-made. Probably not a cheap doll. But something about her proportions feels off. Her head's a little too large, her hands too detailed. And her eyes? Yeah. You don't even want to look directly into them yet. Okiku was a type of ikematsu doll, popular in the Taisho period. You remember reading about them. These dolls were modeled after real children, with their squat little limbs and wide faces. Originally intended to promote child welfare, oddly enough. And they were sometimes named after the child they resembled, or the child they were given to. Which means, someone must have cared about her. Deeply, you place her gently on a wooden stand. Her gaze continues to follow you. Of course it does. But the moment she's upright again, she looks content. If a lump of porcelain and human hair can look content, that is, you don't mean to get attached. But there's something undeniably melancholic about her. Like a clock that's forgotten how to tick. Like an umbrella left behind after the rain, you peer closer. Her lips are slightly open. Painted teeth visible beneath. One front tooth is chipped. That feels unintentional. Suddenly, one of the monks clears his throat behind you. You flinch. Okiku stays still. He tells you that Okiku was once owned by a young girl named Kikuko. A toddler. 2 or 3 years old. The doll was a gift from her older brother, who'd purchased it on a trip to Sapporo in 1918. Supposedly, Kikuko adored the doll. Took it everywhere. Slept with it. Fed it rice grains from her own bowl, then, fever. Nothing unusual for the time. Influenza swept through the island that winter. Some say it was pneumonia. Others say she just stopped breathing one night, no explanation. The doll was left on the family shrine. At first, it was an act of grief. Then, it became a habit. And eventually, an obligation. You imagine that house. Small, close, walls thin as rice paper. A grieving family walking in silence around the doll that still wore their daughter's favorite colors. That's when it started happening, the hair. At first, they thought it was memory playing tricks. Maybe they hadn't trimmed it in a while. But no, Kikuko's father insisted he'd cut it, even burned the ends to prevent fraying. Yet the next week, it was back down to her shoulders, then past them. Soon, it brushed the base of the wooden stand. Now, of course, anyone rational would say it was just a manufacturing oddity. A change in humidity causing synthetic fibers to unravel. The illusion of growth. Easy to explain. Except, this hair didn't just grow. It changed. Some parts were dry. Others oily. The strands had split ends. A few were even graying. They took a sample to a local barber. He examined it under a magnifying glass and said it was real. Human. From a young girl, probably. Natural black, but untreated. Healthy. Slightly coarse. Japanese in origin. That's when the family decided they were done. Okiku was placed in a wooden box, wrapped in cloth, and brought to Menenji Temple by Kikuko's brother, now a young man. He reportedly apologized to the doll before leaving. He didn't look back, and now, over a century later, you're standing in front of that same doll, still wearing the same kimono, still growing that same hair. You try to laugh, but it comes out as more of a dry exhale. This is the part where, in movies, she blinks or her head turns slowly. But Okiku does none of that. She just sits. Waits. Maybe she's forgotten how to play. One monk tells you they tried placing her in storage. Out of sight. But the next morning, she was back on her stand in the main hall. No one admitted to moving her. Another says they used to cut her hair regularly, but after one time in the 1970s, when the lights shattered during a storm, they stopped trimming too much at once. Now it's more of a respectful trim. Like taking your grandma to the salon. Historians still argue whether the hair really grows, one monk says with a sigh, pouring you another cup of tea. But we don't argue. We just clean the floor more often. He laughs, but it's that kind of laugh people use when they're absolutely serious. You crouch beside Okiku again. Her fringe touches her eyebrows now. Her black hair, thick and straight, pools on the tatami in loose curls. You fight the urge to run your fingers through it. You lose that fight. It's soft. Cool to the touch. Clean. Definitely not synthetic. She still doesn't blink, still doesn't move, but you swear you hear a faint sigh. Might have been your. You decide to stay a few more days, not for any noble reason. Just curiosity, maybe. Or the need to know if a doll can actually remember. You sleep in the same guest room at Monenji Temple each night, futon near the altar, Okiku standing silently at her post. Her head seems slightly tilted now. It wasn't like that yesterday. You don't say anything. The monks are kind but evasive. They offer you sweet barley tea and unasked for anecdotes about the weather. But when you bring up Okiku, they tighten, like you've mentioned an ex they all regret dating. You finally get more from the oldest monk, a man who moves like a rusted wind-up toy but whose eyes are clear and sharp. He remembers Kikuko. Barely. Remembers her mother crying in the corner of the temple's garden after the funeral. Remembers the doll being carried in, wrapped in a purple sash, as if she could still feel the cold. Kikuko, he says, wasn't just any child. She was what some called a shugyo no ko, a child whose birth coincided with something sacred, or dangerous, or both. Born during an eclipse. Or was it a comet? The stories shift depending on who's telling them, but everyone agrees, she loved Okiku. Fiercely, you start noticing small things. Okiku's hands are far too detailed for a mass-produced toy. Each fingernail is carved individually. Her palms have faint lines etched in, like lifelines. Her arms, beneath the sleeves, are jointed in a way that suggests motion. The craftsmanship is exquisite, perhaps excessive, and the hair? It's different again today, longer at the sides. A faint wave at the bottom, like it's been resting on something for too long. You run your fingers through it again. You wish you wouldn't. One monk tells you, in passing, that a visitor once left a small silver bell at Okiku's feet. As an offering, perhaps. They returned weeks later to find the bell crushed flat, like it had been stepped on by something very, very heavy. Still, Okiku remains unmoving. Unblinking. Perfectly balanced, head slightly bowed as though politely tolerating your presence. You begin to dream of her. The dreams aren't nightmares. Not exactly. They're just vivid. You're Kikuko now, holding Okiku by the arm, dragging her through puddles. You're laughing. You feel that odd, proud joy a toddler feels when showing off a favorite toy. You climb stairs together. You feed her sweet rice. You scold her for tipping over. You cry when her foot chips, and in the dreams, you always whisper the same thing before falling asleep, "Don't leave me." One night, a candle sputters out on its own. You glance at Okiku. Her hair is fanned out behind her now, like she's been turning in place. But that's impossible. You were watching. Weren't you? The next day, one of the monks asks you to help with temple chores. You rake gravel. You water bonsai trees. You think you see Okiku's shadow at the edge of the garden gate. Another monk tells you, offhand, like he's talking about the plumbing, that the temple once considered burying the doll, like you would a pet. He says, pouring tea. You ask why they didn't. He raises an eyebrow. We did. Apparently, they buried her once. Just once. In the 1940s, during wartime austerity, when the temple feared being looted. They thought it was safer underground, but after the war, when the surviving monks returned, they found Okiku already out, sitting upright on the steps, kimono freshly cleaned. Her box was still buried. Historians still argue whether this ever happened. Some say the story was invented to draw visitors in the post-war years. Others claim the temple discouraged visitors for decades, especially those asking about the doll with hair. That evening, a tourist wanders in. You watch her walk up to Okiku, giggle nervously, and take a photo. You see the camera flash. Once. Twice, then it freezes. Screen black, she smacks it. The monks wince. You think they've seen this before. The woman apologizes. Says she'll come back later. She won't. You help sweep the shrine floor. The broom snags something, that a strand of black hair. Root still attached. You don't tell anyone. By the 6th night, you're starting to accept something peculiar. You feel watched, even when you're not near her. It's not dramatic. No cold gusts. No whispering winds. Just that oddly warm pressure between your shoulder blades, like someone's trying not to be caught looking at you. It's always the same time, too, just after 3 a.m., when the cicadas go quiet and the fans make too much sense. You try turning Okiku toward the wall one evening, just to see. The next morning, she's facing forward again. Same tilt. Same faint smile. Either the monks are messing with you, or you're losing track of how often you blink. You begin keeping a notebook. Not out of fear. Just data collection. Completely normal, totally not obsessive logging of Okiku's posture, hair length, environmental conditions, and your increasingly bizarre dreams. This morning's entry reads, 3:09 a.m., dreamt of someone combing my hair, very slowly, with hands too cold. You decide to do something stupid. You ask the monks if you can borrow Okiku. Just for a few days. A sleepover, you joke. They don't laugh, they huddle. Low voices. Long sighs. Eventually, one monk shrugs and mutters, she'll come back if she wants to. You don't love the phrasing. So now you're in your tiny rental flat in Sapporo, and Okiku is perched on the windowsill, staring blankly into the city haze. You meant to keep her in a storage box, but somehow, you didn't. You light incense. Not for her. For you. Just in case. And then, with a deep breath, you start brushing her hair. You bought a new wooden comb for it, one made from sakura wood. Gentle teeth. Lightweight. No static. Totally normal gift for an utterly normal doll. The hair separates in soft strands. It's cooler than the room. You count 52 brush strokes before stopping. Any more feels impolite. The next morning, the comb is gone. You find it under your pillow, clean. Later, you try watching old footage of the doll, filmed by an NHK crew in the late 90s. It's one of the only public segments allowed by the temple. The footage is boring. She just sits there. No drama. No blinking. But halfway through, you notice something. The bangs are shorter. In one shot, they rest above the eyes. In the next, barely grazing the lashes. The rest of the hair? Same length. Hair doesn't grow like that. Historians still argue whether it's editing, or angle, or an overactive imagination. But deep in an online forum, a comment claims the video was edited to avoid distressing viewers. Whatever that means, you start noticing other things too. She leans slightly more left today. You're almost sure. And the crack on her left toe? It's sealed. You never touched it. You never touched her foot at all. You invite over a friend from university. She's rational, grounded, annoyingly skeptical. Perfect, you say. Tell me what you notice. She walks around Okiku once. Frowns. Creepy, she says. But no weirder than your houseplants. She reaches out to touch the doll's hand. You stop her. Later, she texts you, did you brush something against my neck when I was leaving? Felt like a feather. You didn't. Okiku doesn't move that night. But your dream is different again. This time, you're not Kikuko. You're Kikuko's mother. You watch the child feeding rice to the doll. You kneel beside her, gently adjust the sleeves. You say, that's enough, sweetheart. Dolls don't need seconds. The child nods. The doll turns her head. You wake up with tears drying on your cheeks. There's a strange comfort in it. A shared grief. Or maybe a shared delusion. You're not sure. That day, you decide to test something. You measure the hair precisely. 76 centimeters from crown to end. You seal the strands in a gentle braid. Next morning, braids gone. Hairs still parted. You don't even check the length. What's the point? You stop brushing, you stop measuring, you start whispering instead. Okiku. If you're real, can you blink? Nothing happens. Of course, but later that evening, while washing your face, you see her in the mirror behind you, her head is no longer tilted. It's straight, looking directly at your reflection. When you turn around, she's unchanged. You consider returning her. Tomorrow, maybe. Or never. Instead, you brew some barley tea and sit beside her, sipping quietly. You're not scared, just sleepy. Maybe she's lonely, too. You decide to call someone who might actually believe you. An old professor, semi-retired, half-mad, and famously open to non-traditional interpretations of historical events. You last saw him during a seminar on the metaphysics of shrine objects, where he somehow managed to quote both Carl Jung and Sailor Moon in the same hour. When you explain the situation, there's a long pause. Then, with all the excitement of someone being told their lottery ticket is haunted, he says, "Well, that does sound like a tsukumogami." You don't know the term, so he explains, tsukumogami are objects that, after 100 years of existence, gain sentience. Not always malicious. Not always helpful. Just aware. You said the doll's nearly 100 years old, yes? That could fit. They say it only happens if the item has been especially loved. You glance at Okiku, still silent. Staring, the professor continues. Usually it's umbrellas, shoes, even teacups. But a doll? That's different. That's intimacy. You ask what you should do. His answer is unhelpful. Ask her what she wants. It's the kind of advice that gets you politely escorted out of most modern temples. But something about it lingers. So you try. That evening, you light incense again. Place a little bowl of sweet beans in front of her. Then you say, out loud, "Okiku. What do you want?" "Nothing." You sip tea. Wait. Nothing still, but the next morning, one of the beans is missing. You think, at first, maybe you moved it in your sleep. Then you remember, you never touched the offering tray. Later that day, you video call the professor again. You hold up Okiku, carefully. He squints at her through the screen, mutters, "Fascinating," and then pauses. "Did you ever hear the legend of the hair collector?" You tell him that sounds made up. "Oh, it absolutely is," he says. But also, weirdly common in Japanese folklore. Spirits or creatures that maintain a human connection by growing or collecting hair. There's a theory, pure speculation, that some dolls serve as vessels for these spirits. Especially those gifted or inherited. You ask, like a psychic battery? Exactly. And the longer the hair, the more connection they maintain. You start noticing something new. Your own dreams are now overlapping. You're back as Kikuko. Then you're Kikuko's mother. Then you're something else. A presence in the room. Watching, the stories fold together like laundry in a warm basket. You dream of a boat at sea. A small girl with a doll tucked into her obi sash. A sudden storm. The boat rocking. The doll falling into the waves. You wake up humming a lullaby you've never learned. You look it up. It's real. Old Kagome, Kagome, a song associated with being trapped in a cage. It makes you shiver. You start to realize, the doll isn't haunted in the way people imagine. She's not angry. Not demonic. Not seeking revenge. She's waiting for something to complete. Or return. Or be remembered. You catch yourself talking to her during the day. Want to hear something weird? You ask, and then recount your awkward train ride or the vending machine that gave you 2 cans of coffee. She doesn't respond. But the air feels less heavy. Then, one night, while reorganizing old boxes, you find something. A broken comb, not the Sakura one. A different one. Older. Dustier. You don't remember ever buying it. You try brushing Okiku's hair with it. The teeth slide through like silk. The next morning, the comb is clean and resting beside her feet, as if placed in thanks. Historians still argue whether tsukumogami should be feared or honored. Some say they're mischievous. Others, merely misunderstood. The line between myth and metaphor gets blurry, especially in Japan, where the spiritual and the mundane often live side by side. Drinking the same tea, your professor emails a scanned excerpt from a 1912 children's book. There's an illustration of a doll, eerie, blank-eyed, almost familiar. The caption reads, "She waits, brushing her hair for the one who will remember her name." You stare at the screen. Goosebumps rise, you still don't know what she wants, but you're beginning to think she doesn't either, and maybe that's what binds you. You wake up one morning to the soft sound of something tapping. It's not rhythmic, just faint, uncertain. You lie still, listening, heart slow but alert. There it is again, tap. Pause. Tap tap, you sit up. Look toward the window. Nothing, but Okiku is no longer facing straight ahead. She's turned slightly toward your futon, her gaze meeting yours just enough to say, "Good morning." You blink at her, subtle, you mumble, you try to make coffee, but your hand trembles enough to slosh grounds onto the counter. So you switch to barley tea. Gentler. Earthy, you sit across from her with your mug and say, "Do you want something? More sweets? Another brush?" Still silence, but there's something new. A pressure, not behind your back, but in your chest. Like you're missing a memory that isn't yours. A nostalgic ache for a place you never lived. You open your laptop and search again. This time, not just for Okiku. You dig into early 20th century Japan. Hokkaido. Child mortality. Shrine customs. Dolls buried with the dead. Dolls passed down. Dolls never meant to be left behind, and you find something that in a footnote of a translated journal from a schoolteacher in 1921, one of the girls, Kikuko, brought a doll today, says her brother gifted it to her. She speaks to it often. Not unusual. Many children do this. But the way she listens, unnerving. As if she expects the doll to answer. She asked me today if dolls go to heaven. You sit back in your chair, the same name, the same time period. You begin to wonder, what if the story wasn't just about Kikuko, but was hers? What if the memory isn't folklore, but a life? A life condensed into a wooden frame and yards of silk. You look at Okiku again. Are you still waiting for him? You ask. Her expression, maddeningly, remains the same. But your apartment feels just a hair warmer. Later that evening, you decide to try a small ritual. Nothing elaborate. Just the basics: water, rice, a folded crane. You recite a simple Norito, a Shinto prayer for restless spirits. Your pronunciation is shaky, but your intent feels honest. Afterward, you set the offering beside her and say, "If you're trapped, I hope this helps. If you're staying, I hope it's by choice." You wait, still nothing, but that night, your dream changes. You're back in the temple, but it's not abandoned. It's full, bustling. Monks chanting. Children playing. You walk down the corridor and see Kikuko, alive, smiling, running barefoot across the wooden floors. She's carrying the doll, arms tight around its waist. You call to her, she turns. Blinks, then she says, in a voice too old for her face, "She's not mine anymore." You wake up with a start. A crow caws outside. One long cry. Then silence. The tray of rice you left by the doll is empty. You live alone, and no, you don't have mice. You start keeping her in the entryway now. Not because you want to banish her, but because it feels more respectful. Like a house spirit. A greeter. You leave tiny offerings sometimes. Bits of cloth. A single plum candy, and in return, your dreams soften, less eerie. More wistful. You dream of warm tatami under bare feet. Of the smell of old books. Of singing voices in the distance, out of tune but content. You dream of brushing someone's hair, slowly, with care, and hearing, just faintly, "Thank you." There's a word for this in Japanese you learn, natsukashi. It means nostalgia, but with a twist. A longing for something that might never have happened. A memory half imagined, but fully felt. Historians still argue over whether spiritual experiences are internal or external, whether ghosts are real, or just our own subconscious, performing kabuki on the walls of our brains. But you're less interested in proof now. The doll's hair still grows. Slightly. Not enough to shock you anymore. Just enough to remind you, something's here, and maybe that's enough. It's been 3 weeks since the rice vanished. You've settled into a rhythm with Okiku, less fearful, more like a roommate with very firm boundaries and zero facial expressions. Every few days, you leave her something. A sweet. A flower. A haiku scribbled onto scrap paper. You still don't get answers. But your sleep improves. The dreams, though still vivid, feel more like postcards than prophecies. Gentle scenes. A red umbrella leaning against a temple wall. A tiny sandal on a riverbank. A child's laughter, echoing across dusk. You mention this all in an email to the professor. He replies with something concerningly cheerful, congratulations. You might be the first person to cohabitate with a tsukumogami and not move out or go feral. You don't know whether to be proud or deeply concerned that he attaches a scan of an Edo period woodblock print. It's a lineup of animated household objects, lanterns with legs, shamisen that grin, sandals mid-stride. And there, in the corner, almost tucked out of frame, is a doll. Long hair. Blank eyes. Small caption underneath, Kamisama no Tsukai, messenger of the gods. You wonder, if Okiku is a messenger, what message is she carrying? And to whom, that evening, you visit a local shrine. Not a major tourist draw, just a quiet, mossy place with a rusting offertory box and the smell of pine needles. You kneel, clap twice, and silently think, what am I supposed to do with a doll that may or may not have sentience and definitely eats rice? The wind kicks up just then. One of the Emma, wooden wishing plaques, clinks against the others. You glance at it. Someone's written in messy hiragana, I miss you. I hope you're warm. You walk home quietly, the weight of the doll's presence somehow heavier now, but not in a bad way. That night, while brushing Okiku's hair, a ritual you now perform with quiet respect, and frankly better technique, something odd happens. You spot a tiny knot, just one. As you work through it, a strand of hair comes loose, curling slightly at the end. You blink, the strand is white, not bleached. Not aged. White, like thread pulled from a winter kimono. You set it aside. Keep brushing. But more appear. 3. Then 5. Each snow pale, soft as air. You're not scared. Just, confused. You dream again. This time, you're inside a small, candlelit room. Okiku, alive, the girl, not the doll, sits across from you, brushing her doll's hair with slow, even strokes. She says, without looking up, she remembers. But she forgets, too. You ask her what that means. She tilts her head. You'll see. You wake up with that phrase echoing. She remembers. But she forgets too. You look at the doll. Now, this could be your eyes playing tricks. It could be the morning light. But for a second, her mouth seems slightly different. Softer at the corners. Like someone just about to say something, or maybe just finished saying it. You lean in, nothing, but the feeling lingers. You wonder, what if memory isn't about accuracy, but warmth? What if what Okiku really wants isn't a resolution, but a witness? You decide to start writing down the dreams. Each one. Every detail. You fill a notebook over the next week, documenting the sensory flickers, sandals against stone, the scent of umebashi, a crackling hearth, kikuko humming in an off-key way that always ends with a giggle. Historians still argue whether dreams should count as historical evidence. Freudians say one thing. Buddhists say another. And somewhere in between, folklorists simply smile and ask, isn't the story more interesting this way? You agree that so you keep writing, because maybe memory isn't lost, it's just waiting for someone to listen. It's been a month since you started keeping the notebook. Every morning, you wake up, drink your barley tea, and carefully add to the pages. Each day's dream feels like a fleeting memory, too detailed to be coincidence, yet too distant to be fully yours. You find yourself thinking about Okiku in the oddest places, while waiting in line at the grocery store, on a quiet walk through the park, even during your lunch break. In these small, mundane moments, your mind drifts to her. You've stopped being afraid, maybe you've even grown a little attached. You're no longer sure where the line blurs between the doll and the girl from your dreams. Is Okiku a physical presence, or something more? Sometimes it feels like she exists in both places simultaneously. Alive and dead. Real and imagined. And sometimes, you wonder if she exists because you've chosen to see her that way. One evening, as you're tidying up the apartment, you notice something strange. Okiku's doll's hair, her long, dark locks, have grown noticeably longer since the last time you measured it. A bit too long. The kind of growth that feels out of place, as if the doll's hair somehow belongs to someone else. You sit beside her, pull out the tiny measuring tape you keep for all things domestic, and gently measure the strands. The hair is a good 2 inches longer than when you last checked. You glance up at her face. The same blank, doll-like expression, except now, there's a new feeling in the room. A stillness that sits at the edges of everything. It's as if the air around you has become more present. And heavy. You feel as though you've crossed a threshold. At first, you think you're imagining it. But then you remember the white hairs from before, the ones that looked too delicate, too frail to be human, yet they came from her head. You're not sure what to do. Should you be alarmed? Should you act? Instead, you just sit there, staring at her. The longer you look, the more unsettling it feels, but also somehow comforting, like a memory you can't place but need to remember. You run your fingers over the doll's hair, as though brushing it back into place. But the sensation, it's different this time. The hair is softer than it should be, like the finest silk. You pull your hand back. Okiku, you murmur, as if testing the sound of her name. Nothing, but the hair, when you look again, is longer still. The room feels different. Like someone is standing just behind you, breathing your air, but you don't turn to check. You know they're there, just out of sight. Just out of reach. Historians still argue over the mechanics of supernatural events. Some believe spirits can't touch the physical world at all, but simply influence it in subtle ways. Others suggest the divide between life and death is porous, like paper thin and ready to tear at any moment. It's why ritual, they say, matters, to create safe boundaries for the world of the living and the dead. You can't help but wonder if Okiku's presence here is bending the boundaries. Not just between past and present, but between memory and desire. Between the living and the dead. That night, as you prepare to sleep, you find yourself looking at her again. You tell her one more time, if you're waiting, I'll listen. The room is silent, the air doesn't shift. The hair doesn't grow. And yet, something shifts in your mind. You realize, with a sudden clarity, that you're no longer the only one who's waiting. She's waiting, too. For what? You're not sure. But you're no longer afraid to find out. You're not exactly sure when it begins. The change is slow, like water warming in a pot. But one day, while sipping your morning tea, you realize something odd. Your dreams aren't yours anymore. You still see the same places, the old wooden house, the narrow corridor, the soft glow of oil lamps. But you're no longer the observer. You are Kikuko now. Small hands. Short legs. You don't walk, you scamper. You don't speak, you giggle, and Okiku isn't the doll. She's your sister. Or something like a sister. In the dream, you're brushing her hair while she hums, her voice light and high-pitched. She whispers stories to you, strange ones. About gods with too many arms. About a fox who fell in love with a fisherman. About a bridge that leads nowhere. You wake up feeling peaceful, if slightly confused. Later that afternoon, you notice a smudge on Okiku's cheek. A tiny one, like soot. You reach for a cloth, but when you wipe it, it doesn't come off. In fact, you realize it's not on her surface at all. It's under the lacquer. Embedded. Like an imperfection that's always been there, but you're only now able to see it. You hold her gently, tilting her under the light. And that's when you notice something else. Her eyes, they aren't just painted black. There are flecks now, brown, almost amber, around the edges. Like they've absorbed something. Or someone. You place her back down and step away. You don't touch her for a full day after that. Instead, you try to ground yourself in something tactile. Laundry. Cleaning. Reorganizing your bookshelf in alphabetical order, then abandoning that for color coding, then giving up entirely and watching old variety shows with the volume turned low. But Okiku lingers, every corner. Every reflection. Every flicker of shadow where something might be. That night, you have another dream. Only this one is different. You're not in the house anymore. You're in a forest. A cold one. Thin trees. Wind whistling like a flute played off-key. You're barefoot, and you're not alone. There's something behind you. You don't see it. But you know it's there. Breathing slow and deep. Okiku, doll or girl, it's unclear. whispers, "Don't stop walking." You do as she says, until you reach a shrine. It's ruined. Half buried in earth. Overgrown with moss. But inside is a single object resting neatly at the altar, your notebook, the one you've been filling with all the dreams. You open it, but every page is blank, except the last. On it, in spidery black ink, are 5 words you remember for both of us. You wake up gasping. Outside, the wind has picked up. The tree branches scratch against the glass like long fingernails. You walk to the living room. Slowly. Heart heavy, Okiku sits in her usual spot. You look at her. And, for the first time, you swear her head tilts. Just slightly. As if in recognition. "All right," you whisper. "I'll remember." You retrieve the notebook and begin writing. Not just dreams now. But everything, the forest. The soot mark. The amber in her eyes. You make a promise to her, not out loud, but silently, the way one might promise the moon that you'll be her archive, her story keeper, and maybe that's what she's wanted all along. Not release, not vengeance, not haunting, just memory. Historians still argue about whether memory is fixed or fluid. Whether it binds us to truth, or bends to the needs of the present. Whether remembering for someone else, someone long gone, honors them or reshapes them. You're starting to believe it doesn't matter. Sometimes, remembering is the offering. You wake to the sound of gentle rain, tapping like fingertips across the windowpane. It's early. The city hasn't quite stretched into itself yet. Stillness clings to everything, and for once, Okiku feels less like an anomaly and more like part of the landscape, another quiet shape in the morning gloom. You light a candle. You've started doing that in the mornings now. There's something grounding about it. The way the flame flickers. How it hums against silence without breaking it. Okiku sits in her usual place, but today you feel bold, or maybe just tired of tiptoeing. You bring your tea to the table and sit down directly across from her. "You've been quiet," you say. She doesn't answer, of course. But her hair seems to shimmer slightly in the dim light, like it's remembering how to move. You open the notebook, now well into its final pages, and begin to read aloud. Not your thoughts. Not your feelings. Just the dreams, each one, in the order they came. Each detail, each sensory flicker. The sandal by the river. The whispered fox stories. The ruined shrine with its moss-eaten altar. As you read, the room seems to lean inward. Not ominously, but attentively. Like a breath held, you reach the latest dream, the forest, the notebook, the 5 words, and pause. You glance up. Okiku is unchanged, but something in your own chest softens. Later that day, you visit the library. Not the big central one, but a smaller branch with more dust than staff. You ask about old records. Local legends. Shrine demolitions. You're not even sure what you're looking for, but something pulls you. The librarian, a sleepy-eyed man in his 60s, raises an eyebrow but doesn't ask questions. He brings you a stack of clippings and yellowed newsletters dating back to the 1940s. And there, in one of the newsletters, is something peculiar. An article titled, "Mysterious Shrine Fire in Northern Hokkaido, Local Dull Unscathed." It's brief. A few paragraphs. Mentions a storm. A lightning strike. A shrine that burned to the ground, but what catches your eye is this line: "Only one object survived the blaze, an old, well-kept ikamatsu doll with long black hair, found seated calmly among the ashes." You sit back in your chair. The article is dated 1942. The hair, the soot under the lacquer, the dreams. You take a photo of the page and send it to the professor with the subject line, "Okiku was in a fire?" His reply is instant, uncharacteristically blunt: "Wait. That shrine was real?" You smile. Just a little. Back home, you print out the article and tape it into your notebook. Later that night, you have another dream. You're not Kikuko anymore. You're someone older. A mother? A sister? Hard to say. You're kneeling in the ruins of the shrine, holding something in your arms. It's Okiku, hair singed at the ends. Kimono streaked with ash. She looks at you and says, simply, "Don't forget me." You nod, tears sliding down a face that doesn't feel like yours, yet aches like it is. When you wake, there's ash on your fingertips, only a little. Just enough to make you pause. You go to the sink, wash your hands. You don't panic. You just accept it, you begin to understand that she's not here to haunt, that she's here to be remembered, and for the first time, you stop trying to interpret every sign like a puzzle. You just sit. And let her be. Historians still argue whether dolls were truly believed to contain souls, or whether they simply helped the living carry their grief. The answer, as always, is probably yes. You light a candle again. Sit beside her. You're not alone, you say, and for once, the room doesn't feel empty when you speak. Rain again, but heavier this time, steady and rhythmic, as if the sky's been waiting for a good cry. You stay inside, of course. There's nowhere pressing to be. Just you, a stack of warm laundry waiting to be folded, and Okiku, waiting for something else entirely. You bring her to the table with you today, not out of bravery. More like routine. Like setting out placemats or filling the kettle. You prop her up carefully on a folded towel and place the notebook beside her. She faces you now, directly. You say nothing. She says nothing, but the air between you hums faintly. You begin folding socks. Slowly. Deliberately. One pair, then another. Somehow, this tiny task feels sacred now. Like the space between folds is also the space between worlds. Midway through, your phone buzzes. It's the professor again. His message is short. There's more. Can we talk? You call him, half expecting static or cryptic metaphors. But his voice is clear, almost excited. I found something in a doctoral thesis, he says. Obscure university journal. Unpublished research, mostly interviews with shrine caretakers in northern Japan. One mentioned a doll kept for decades after a fire. Said it grew hair. Thought it was a local superstition, until I saw your article. You remain quiet. That he continues. They said the family who donated the doll visited once a year. That they believed the doll held the spirit of their daughter. You feel the world lean, slightly. Did it mention a name? He hesitates. Yes. Kikuko. You sit down. Thought you'd want to know, he says. Anyway, let's catch up soon. You hang up and stare at Okiku. You're not just a story, you murmur. You're a promise someone made and tried to keep. The name loops in your mind like a lullaby. Kikuko, the girl in the dreams. The barefoot child in the forest. The one who calls Okiku sister. You thought you were her. But maybe, she's been remembering you. Historians still argue about collective memory, whether we inherit echoes, or create them ourselves. Whether dreams are windows or just wishful replays of stories we've heard. But you're starting to think some memories don't belong to one person at all. Maybe they're shared. Maybe they drift until someone's ready to carry them. You light the candle again. Let the silence settle, then you write one line in your notebook. She kept her promise. Now it's my turn. That night, sleep takes you slowly. Not the tumble of exhaustion, but the soft sinking of surrender, and in the dream, there's no forest. No shrine. Just a room filled with warm yellow light. Tatami mats. Sliding paper doors. And a low table with 2 teacups. Kikuko sits on one side, you, across from her. She doesn't speak, but she smiles, and in that moment, you know, you are no longer her. She is no longer you. But somehow, you've both been keeping the same story alive, page by page, breath by breath. You wake before the tea is poured. Okiku is exactly where you left her, only now, there's something tucked under her hand. A tiny, folded paper crane. You don't scream. You don't even flinch. You unfold it. Inside is a single word. Thank you. You keep the paper crane beside your bed, not on a shelf. Not tucked into a drawer. Just there, within reach, within sight. A reminder that this isn't just a story you've stumbled into. It's one that chose you. The next morning, the rain has stopped. The clouds remain, thick and drowsy, but the light feels gentler. You open the windows and let the air move through the apartment. It smells like wet pavement, pine, and the ghost of burned incense. Okiku sits quietly at the edge of the table, hair gently stirring in the breeze. You swear she's smiling. Or maybe it's just the way her head is tilted now, slightly to the left, as if listening. You sit with her. Say nothing. Just sip your tea and listen with her. Later, you head back to the library. You're looking for something older. Not clippings this time, but shrine records, oral folklore transcriptions, even poetry. Anything that might link Okiku, Kikuko, and the doll with growing hair to something broader, older. The librarian from before sees you and hands you a new stack of materials without being asked. Figured you'd be back, he mutters, sliding over a dusty binder labeled Regional Folklore, Hokkaido. You dive in. Most of it is the usual mix: yokai sightings, seasonal rituals, suspiciously convenient ghost stories meant to scare children into obedience. But one entry catches your eye. A priest interviewed in 1965 describing a ritual called Kuchidzuki no Shirori, the sealing of a memory into an object through shared grief. You blink, the details are sparse, but the idea is striking: a ceremony performed when a loved one dies suddenly, where an object that belonged to them, often a doll, mirror, or comb, is offered at a shrine with a whispered wish. The priest claimed the practice was once common in the northern regions but faded by the mid-20th century. Too intimate, too inconvenient for modern funerals. You take a photo of the entry. When you return home, Okiku is still there, unchanged, waiting. You wonder, was Kikuko's family trying to seal a memory? Or release one? Historians still argue about the line between remembrance and superstition. Was the growing hair a sign of haunting, or just a clever bit of folklore to make sense of grief? Some believe these stories are metaphors. Others claim literal truth. You're starting to think both sides are missing the point. You pull out the notebook. Next to your line, "She kept her promise. Now it's my turn." You write, "This is not a haunting. It's a conversation." You sit with that idea for a while. Let it bloom. That night, the dream returns, but it's different once again. You're back in the house. The real one. Your apartment, only now, there are shadows where furniture should be. The outlines of things long gone. An old radio. A bamboo mat. A tiny wooden comb. Kikuko walks beside you, humming. You follow her into the hallway, and it stretches longer than you remember. She opens a door at the end, revealing a room filled with dolls. Not creepy ones. Not like in horror movies. Just quiet faces, delicate features, watching. Kikuko walks up to one with a chipped cheek and rests her hand on its head. "This one remembers too," she says softly. You ask her, "Why me?" She shrugs. You're still listening. You wake to the sound of the neighbor's cat mewling outside your window. No paper cranes this time. Just Okiku, in her spot, calm and unmoving. You place the notebook beside her and whisper, "I'm still listening." And somehow, that's enough. You start leaving the notebook open now. A simple shift, but it changes the mood of the room. Like putting out a spare cup of tea for a guest. Like saying, "You're welcome here," without needing to say it aloud. Okiku doesn't move. Not in any way you can catch with your eyes. But something subtle happens. The air around her feels more settled. Less waiting, more resting. As if her work, whatever it was, might be nearly done. The professor calls again. "Quick question," he says, skipping niceties. "Did you notice any changes in the hair length?" You paused. A reasonable question. You've been so caught up in the story, the dreams, the memories that aren't quite yours, you haven't measured anything. You hang up, grab a ruler, and approach. It's long. Past the shoulders now. You compare it to one of the earlier photos in your phone, taken out of curiosity. Weeks ago. In that one, the hair ends just above her shoulder blades. You look again now. It grazes the base of her back. You sit down slowly. "Well," you mutter. "That's not ominous at all." You tell yourself it could be your imagination. You haven't exactly been logging lengths daily. But the difference is hard to ignore. Too neat. Too precise. Historians still argue about the Okiku doll on display in Hokkaido, whether its hair growth is natural, supernatural, or clever stagecraft. One study in 2007 claimed the hair was that of a human child, but the source was never confirmed. Of course, it never is. You jot down the new measurement in the notebook. Not for proof. Just for continuity. Later that evening, you visit an antique shop. You're looking for something undefined, only knowing you'll recognize it when you see it. Among cracked porcelain and dusty teacups, you find a tiny lacquered mirror. The kind meant to be carried in a silk pouch. Hairline fractures run across the back, but the glass inside is flawless. It costs the equivalent of a bus ride and a snack. You buy it, back home, you place it beside Okiku, nothing happens. No glow. No flicker of lights. Just the two of them, mirror and doll, resting quietly. That night, your dream takes you to a bridge. It arches over a wide, slow-moving river. Lanterns float on the water, each carrying a small bundle, paper, string, sometimes a doll's comb or a lock of hair. Kikuko stands at the center of the bridge. She's not smiling. She's watching the lanterns drift. You step beside her. Are we done? You ask. She doesn't look at you, but she speaks. Not yet. One more thing. You try to ask what, but the dream fades like mist before the question lands. You wake with the taste of river water in your mouth. Metallic. Not unpleasant. Beside you, the mirror has turned, just slightly. As if nudged, you leave it that way. Something is shifting. Closing in, you feel it, and for the first time, you're not afraid. You wake to silence. Not the absence of noise, but the presence of stillness. Like the apartment is holding its breath. Okiku sits on the table, just as always, but something about her posture is different. Straighter. Calmer, her hair glistens faintly in the morning light. You lean in to inspect the mirror beside her. No new cracks, no sign of movement. But as you lift it gently, you spot something on the back of the lacquered case, a symbol etched so faintly into the wood, you missed it before. 3 tiny kanji characters, memory sealed. You don't recognize the calligraphy. You didn't notice it in the shop. But it's there now, no question. Your hands tremble just a little. Back at your desk, you start researching the phrase. It doesn't show up in any mainstream search. But buried in a blog post about Edo period burial practices, you find a reference, Kyoku Fuin, a rare belief that memories too painful or sacred could be sealed into physical objects for safekeeping. Mirrors were a common vessel. Dolls, another. Suddenly, the mirror and the doll don't seem like separate pieces. They're twin halves of something old. Something private. A grief ritual, maybe. Or a promise made flesh. You think back to Kikuko's words on the bridge. One more thing. You return to the notebook and begin writing. Not a journal entry this time, but a letter. To Okiku.to whoever might be listening. You write of what you've seen. What you've dreamed. What you've remembered. You write as if you are both witness and participant, scribe and sister, and when the letter is done, you fold the paper into a crane, just as the one that appeared beside Okiku. You place it in her lap, and you wait. Night falls, the apartment dims naturally, no need for switches or ceremony, and then, a sound, small. Delicate, the paper crane unfolds itself. 1 Perfect movement, flat once again. Inside, a single kanji, freshly inked, not yours. At the end, you feel it as you read it, not a goodbye. A completion. The dream that night is shorter than usual. You're back on the bridge, but now it's empty. No lanterns. No river. Just fog and the quiet hush of something finished. You stand alone, and feel no fear, just peace. When you wake, Okiku is gone, not stolen. Not misplaced, just gone. The towel where she once sat remains undisturbed. The mirror is cool to the touch. You search the apartment, just to be sure, nothing, but when you open the notebook, you find the final entry, not in your handwriting. You kept your promise. Thank you. Historians still argue about the Okiku doll's origins, its purpose, and its current whereabouts. But you're no longer interested in resolving the debate, because some stories don't ask to be solved, they ask to be carried, and now, you can finally set yours down. It's been weeks. The apartment is quieter now. But not empty. There's a feeling, soft, steady, that lingers in the walls, like a lullaby that hums just beneath hearing. You still pause near the window where Okiku once sat. Out of habit. Or reverence, the mirror remains. You've placed it on a small stand. Not hidden away, but not quite on display either. It catches the light sometimes, throwing patterns onto the walls like gentle reminders. You no longer look into it expecting to see someone else. But when you do catch your reflection, it feels shared. The notebook is full now, page after page of questions, sketches, dream fragments. And between it all, tiny moments of clarity. Like the way the lanterns in the dream floated upstream, not down. Or the way Kikuko never blinked in your dreams, but never felt unnatural. You revisit the library one last time. The librarian gives you a strange look. Then smiles. No more dolls, he asks, you shrug. Just finishing the footnotes. You find a final piece buried in a shelf no one touches. A travelogue from 1911, written by a wandering priest who recorded unusual spiritual objects found across rural Japan. One entry reads, in a village beyond Sapporo, a doll said to hold the hair of a child taken too soon. Watched over by a sister, though no one now remembers her name. You underline that last part. No one remembers her name, but you do. Back home, you begin boxing the materials. Not to discard. To archive. The story's not leaving. Just resting. You frame one page from the notebook, the one with the crane, now pressed flat. You kept your promise. Thank you. There's something final in those words, but also freeing. You sit with a cup of tea, watching the light shift on the walls. The mirror catches it just right, sending a streak of gold across the floor. You don't follow it. You just let it be. Sometimes closure isn't a door shutting, that it's a window opening. You think of all the stories whispered across time. The ones that don't end with a bang, but a breath. A whisper. A strand of hair left behind in the folds of a pillow, and you wonder, what story will find you next? Because they always do. You rest your head back, breathe in, the kettle ticks softly as it cools. Outside, the wind hums past the eaves, and you smile. You were listening, and someone, heard you. And now, you're still. The flicker of streetlights has faded. The sounds of the night have curled into themselves, like sleepy cats stretching into corners. Your room is quieter, somehow softer than before. You feel the quiet in your bones. Not heavy, just settled. Take a breath. Not because you need to. Just because you can. Let the air move through you like river water under an ancient bridge. You might still be thinking about Okiku. Or Kikuko. Or the whisper of folded paper in the dark. That's alright. Let them pass by like low clouds, there, and then not. You don't need to remember everything. The story remembers for you, and maybe, if you listen just closely enough, you'll feel it, the gentle rhythm of old things at peace. Of dolls no longer waiting. Of memories finding rest not in forgetting, but in being seen. Close your eyes now. There's nothing else you need to do. The mirror stays quiet. The room stays warm. The stories have been told, and you are part of them now. Let the softness take you. Let your thoughts uncurl and drift. You're safe. You're still. You're here. Sleep, friend, sleep.